What's up, guys? When PaddleTek announced the new Tempest line of paddles, it was immediately met with a lot of memes about the grit technology, the poor design job, and just general skepticism. In a year where we've seen unbelievable paddles come out for low prices, can PaddleTek still compete? For this review, I will primarily be focusing on the Wave V3 and the Wave V3 Pro. I did play with the Rain as well, but I had more fun using the Wave than I did the Rain. During my testing, I did not notice any significant differences that I found were worth mentioning, other than the fact that the Wave has a slightly better sweet spot. So for this review, I will be talking about the Wave line unless I specify otherwise. The new non-Pro versions of the Tempest line sell for $199, while the Pro models sell for $209. The difference is that the Pro models are 14.3mm, while the non-Pro models are 12.7mm. I do find it bizarre that PaddleTek has such non-standard dimensions on their paddles when most are listed as 13 and 16mm, especially considering the Tempest series is supposed to be their control line, but hey, it is what it is. I just want to quickly cover a few things about the grip and handle on these paddles. First, the handle is an oval shape rather than an octagon. It didn't personally bother me, but if you do prefer octagons, be aware that this doesn't have one. Second, you can't feel the exposed polymer and the handle feels pretty solid, which is interesting because Engage actually uses a similar method to cover their polymer in their handles, but it feels much worse in Engage paddles. They're both using some little wrap, which when I search it online, I found images of it, but I'm still not entirely sure what it's made for. I feel like I've heard it's for kind of like a cable tie or something. Anyways, it doesn't really matter what it's for, but both Engage and PaddleTek are using this and it's kind of squishy. And on the Engage, you can still feel the sharp edges, which makes the handle feel less enjoyable. PaddleTek added one layer of wrap tape around the grip, and then once the overgrip is thrown on top, the handle actually feels quite solid. So while the grip shape or build isn't as premium as other options, it really isn't an issue and doesn't feel bad to me. Third, the one thing that did bother me about the handle is how PaddleTek does their butt caps. Near the bottom, there's this area that flares out, and for some reason, when my pinky rests on it, I just find it annoying and uncomfortable. It's not uncommon for butt caps to flare out, but the way PaddleTek does it, it's just annoying. Putting an overgrip on top does help alleviate the issue a little bit, but you can still kind of feel it. PaddleTek is calling their carbon fiber surface iced carbon. When looking at it under a microscope, there's not many things for me to compare it against. It feels slightly different than how most paint grit paddles feel to the touch, but it also just kind of looks like paint grit under the microscope. PaddleTek is calling part of it perma spin technology. They say it lets serious players have spin capabilities that last longer than other carbon fiber surfaces. In my roughly 30 or so hours of testing this paddle, my Wave V3 still seems to be getting the same amount of spin as when I got it, and there hasn't been any noticeable degradation. I don't have a way to fully test their perma-spin technology claim, as it would just result in way more hours being put on this paddle. My guess is that like many things, it's going to wear down similar to a bunch of the other surfaces on the market. So we'll have to wait for widespread reports of how long it actually lasts. I tested all 4 Tempest paddles and they range from 1700 through 1800 RPM, which is a significant increase from the original PaddleTeks, which were around the 1000 to 1100 RPM range, which was just abysmal. So whatever PaddleTek is doing now, it's actually made the spin usable. Every shot feels great to me, but the face doesn't feel quite as sticky on certain shots, mainly rolls and aggressive dinks. It feels like a raw carbon fiber surface grips the ball harder, whereas on the PaddleTek, it slips a little bit more. I got used to it and didn't find it to be a big issue, but certain shots felt like I had to think slightly harder to get the ball to do what I wanted. After a few games, it really wasn't a problem. Just be aware that this surface combination probably isn't better than raw carbon fiber unless the durability is significantly longer, like they're claiming. With that being said, it's great that PaddleTeks finally get good spin. Now it's just a question of how long it will last.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Let's talk about the Wave V3. the thinner model first. This ended up being my favorite of all the new Tempest paddles. When it came to control, I will say that the Wave V3 really wasn't that great. It's a really poppy paddle, and the biggest areas that I had issues with were resets, blocks, as well as third shot drops. The first handful of sessions, I found everything going very high and having to fight really hard to get back into the point, or I just gave my opponent an easy put away. For blocks and resets, I was able to loosen my grip enough to compensate and mostly resolve this issue. However, for drops, this area did remain the most difficult for me. While it did get better and I was usually able to get to the kitchen reliably, I never got to a point where I felt 100% confident in my drops. Instead of hitting a drop and charging the net, I was always second guessing whether or not it was good enough to come in on. With other raw carbon fiber paddles, this hasn't ever really been a worry for me. I think part of this is that on the Wave 3, the ball doesn't feel like it dwells on the face very long, it pops off very quickly, and the way that I hit my drops, having a bit more dwell time just makes it easier for me. I don't know that this is actually what's happening, but that's the sensation that I'm feeling. Oddly enough, I felt perfectly confident in my dinks, and that was never an issue, which was great to see. Overall, the Wave V3 is going to be a bit hard to control. In fact, I'm almost surprised this is under the Tempest line of paddles, since PaddleTek calls it their control line, but I would personally call the Wave V3 a power paddle. Now, you might expect the thicker Wave V3 Pro to be better for control, and it is, but I still don't know if I would classify it as a control paddle. While it's certainly softer and not as poppy as the Wave V3, but it still has quite a bit of pop for what in theory should be a control paddle. I found that I had similar issues with my third shot drops not being very consistent. It's more plush than the Wave V3, but as soon as you put it against a Vatic Prism Flash or Ronbus R1.16, or really any Gen 1 raw carbon fiber paddle, it's evident that the Wave V3 Pro has considerable more pop to it. In my opinion, the Wave V3 Pro plays way closer to an all-court paddle than it does a control paddle. As you can imagine, based on my thoughts for control, the Wave V3 packs a big punch. The area that I believe it excels in most is at the net for hand battles. The ball comes off the face so quickly that it makes hand battles feel much easier. In fact, this is my favorite attribute of the Wave V3. I felt it was so much easier to get ahead in hand battles because the paddle is so fast in the hand while also packing a lot of punch. Usually, the lower the swing weight, you do start to lose out on some pop and power. There are a few outliers like this and the Pro Kenix Black Ace, but generally speaking, as that number goes down, you do lose a bit of power. So having both attributes in one is a great combo for a lot of people. The only area that it might not be as powerful as something like a Carbon 1X is on drives. Because the paddle is very light and has a lower swing weight, the paddle doesn't feel like it clobbers the ball in the same way. With that being said, I still felt that I had plenty of power from the baseline. I haven't ran John Q's pop and power test on the Wave V3, but if I had to guess, it would be similar to the Pro Kenix Black Ace, where it ranks quite high for pop, but then power would be more middle of the pack. Regardless of how it ranks in a technical sheet, I felt that I had plenty of pop and power from all areas of the court, but it specifically excelled at the net. I don't know if Engage and PaddleTek use the same core supplier or something else within their paddles, but they both have a very distinct pop and feel off the paddle that I haven't found in any other paddles yet. It's highly satisfying and something that I really enjoy hitting with. It's firm and the ball pops off really quickly. The face feels very responsive and not muted like a lot of raw carbon fiber paddles, which isn't a good or a bad thing, but if you are someone who doesn't like that muted feel, the PaddleTeks definitely don't have that. Across the board, all of the Tempest line of paddles had low swing weights. My Wave Pro V3 came in at 105, while the Wave V3 was 106. Both of these are very low numbers and will feel incredibly fast in the hand. The Waves go as low as 7.4 ounces on their website, and you're able to specify the weight that you want. This combination of low weight and swing weight can be great for those that really want a light paddle, whether it's for strength issues, hand speed, or any other reason. I think this makes the Wave a perfect option for those that don't want a heavy paddle. My Rain V3 was 110 swing weight and the Rain Pro V3 was 114. These are also very low for an elongated paddle and they have the same weight range as the Wave line. So again, I think this makes the entire Tempest line very good for those seeking fast paddles with good pop. When talking about the sweet spot, we've now started talking about twist weight. This is a good way to gauge how stable a paddle is. Twist weight is how resistant your paddle is to twisting in your hand on off-center shots to the left and right of your sweet spot. The higher the number, the more stable it will feel, while a lower number usually means it's less stable. Stability often translates well into how good a sweet spot feels. My Wave V3 came in at 6.7, which is a very good twist weight number. Anything below 6 tends to translate to a less stable paddle, which means the sweet spot usually doesn't feel great. Oddly enough, my Wave Pro V3 came in at a lower number of 6.25, which is the first time that I have ever seen a thicker paddle come in at a lower twist weight. I find this particularly odd because my waves were both the same weight out of the box. Now, translating to actual gameplay, I never had any complaints about the sweet spot. I found it was plenty generous, and it was never something that crossed my mind while playing with it. There were no noticeable areas in my testing that felt significantly lacking. Now, oddly enough, again, with the rain paddles, the thinner V3 model had a higher twist weight at 5.78 when compared to the Rain Pro V3, which was 5.52. While this difference is not substantial, it is still odd that the thicker model had the lower twist weight. I didn't find the sweet spot to feel as poor as the number suggests, but when compared against the Wave, it was a noticeable difference, especially on blocks and resets. Now, this is normal. Elongated shapes almost always have lower twist weights than standard shape paddles. So if you're already used to an elongated PaddleTek, you don't need to worry about the sweet spot feeling worse on these new models. While I was mostly fine with the Wave V3 out of the box, I did add lead tape to customize it a bit further. Mine was just a little bit too light, and I thought adding lead tape would help increase how solid it felt. I added 0.1 ounce on each side just above the throat, which was a recommendation by Pickleball Effect, and I also added 0.2 ounces into the handle. The swing weight went up from 106 to 109, which is not a significant jump at all. Then the twist weight jumped from 6.87 to 7.58, which is a pretty high number for twist weight. Overall, the paddle felt more hefty, was still very fast, and the power felt marginally increased. The extra weight just cleaned up the feel of the paddle for me and made it that extra 5 to 10% better. I'd highly recommend this lead tape setup if you try the paddle. I'm not gonna lie, guys, I was fully ready for these PaddleTeks to be the joke of the year. The fact that they launched with no claim of any new technology other than some grit that on paper didn't sound very different, along with hardly changing the graphics from the last generation, it sounded like a recipe for a horrible review. But after playing with them, I can honestly say that these are great paddles. They have fantastic feel, they're fast in the hand, good sweet spots on the waveline, and they're light, which makes them highly customizable. And most importantly for PaddleTek, they don't suck for spin anymore. Every person I met that saw me with a PaddleTek would usually say, that thing has to be garbage. And then they'd often make fun of it. Then I would hand them the paddle and say, just play with it a little bit. And every single one of them always ended up saying, dang, that paddle's way better than I expected it to be. That's how I would best summarize my opinion. It exceeded my expectations and ended up being a paddle that I think has a lot of good things that a segment of the market will really care about. Those things are good spin, a lifetime warranty, made in the US, a paddle with good pop, low swing weight, which makes them fast in the hand, and a selectable weight range that goes very low. So if weight and swing weight are top of mind, this is a great option to have. This paddle is this close to making it into my personal top 5 favorite paddles. The only thing holding it back is that the handle is just a little bit too short. It's really difficult for me to put 2 hands on the paddle, and I can put my finger on the back, but I don't like doing that if I don't have to, and just a little bit of my bottom hand had to hang off the handle to even put my finger on the back. So overall, it was just a little bit annoying to use for my two-handed backhand. Now, of course, if you don't use a two-handed backhand, that's not gonna be a problem for you at all. That's just what's stopping it from being in my top 5 favorite paddles. Even at the $200 price range, I think this paddle is reasonably priced. Are there really, really good paddles for cheaper? Absolutely. Many of the new brands like Vatic and 60 have set a new bar for performance at lower prices. However, almost none of these cheaper brands offer a lifetime warranty. If that's of value to you, I think $200 is not an unreasonable ask for this paddle when there are other companies selling paddles for more money and the warranties are only 6 months. All in all, I really like the Wave V3. I think if you already enjoyed PaddleTek, then this is an easy purchase. However, if you have a Gen 2 raw carbon fiber paddle, I don't know that there's anything these do better other than the low swing weight and good pop. Spin on raw carbon fiber paddles still seems to feel better overall than it does on the Tempest line. So yeah, if you plan to pick one of these up, just make sure that the pros of the paddle I listed are things that you really care about. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.